Welcome back to the channel. I have a new book for you today. This one I just completed recently. In addition, I hope I figured out the lighting issue. I was having some weird issues with my webcam. It kept like resampling the light. I don't know exactly what it was doing, but it was shifting in and out of lighting modes. I don't know. Anyway, it looks like it's not doing that right now. Hopefully that will continue. So I finished reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir recently. I picked this up for free on like Kindle, I think. I was looking through the books in my Kindle library and this was there. I don't remember. This isn't a book that I would have picked. It's not really my genre. I do like some sci-fi, and I did end up liking Gideon the Ninth, in spite of what Charles Stross. If you look right here, it says lesbian necromancers explore a haunted Gothic palace in space. Don't believe that. I don't know where he got that from. This is more along the lines of, well, the original title was 10 Little Indians by Agatha Christie, and this ends up, but I think it's called Then There Were None, because of political correctness. Anyway, so Gideon is a swordswoman. She is a soldier, basically, for the Ninth House. In this futuristic fantasy world, there was an event called the Resurrection, and the Emperor became the first Necro Lord. So he was a necromancer, and he's so powerful as a necromancer that they refer to him as God. And through his abilities, he resurrected the universe, something of that nature. It's not really well defined what the resurrection was. And it could be that because this is the first book, they don't really go into that, and they get into it in the later books. But there are 9 houses, 9 major houses in the universe, and Gideon belongs to the 9th house. Each of these houses is ruled over by a necromancer who has with him a cavalier. So the necromancer is there to handle the magic. The cavalier is there to handle the fighting, the physical aspects. And so the necromancers tend to be, as you would expect them to be, sickly, scholarly, etc., etc. Gideon's necromancer is Harrowhark, and each of the necromancers and their cavaliers is summoned to the first house. The first house being the Emperor's house on his main planet. Now, Gideon isn't actually the cavalier for 9th house. 9th house has a cavalier, but that cavalier is just for show. And Gideon is just a swordswoman. She prefers the two-handed longsword. She doesn't like the one-handed rapier with the offhand weapon. But when all this goes down, that the Emperor has summoned the necromancers from their houses and their cavalier. The Ninth House is pretty much down and out. They have very little resources. Their house is dying. They live basically underground, even on their planet, and they never go out into the sun. And their planet is a giant tomb world, as opposed to the other houses that actually have planets and citizens and all this other stuff. When all this goes down, that the necromancers and their cavaliers have been summoned by the Emperor, the cavalier of Ninth House makes a run for it. He just takes off and is like, see you later. I'm not doing this, because he is expecting that when he gets there, he'll have to fight, and that's just not who he is. He doesn't really know how to fight. It's just for show. So they train Gideon with a little blackmail. They train Gideon because she really doesn't want to do it. She hates being a member of the Ninth House. She knows nothing about her past. She is an orphan, and so she feels no ties, no loyalty to Ninth House. But they blackmail and bribe her to be part of this, basically saying, if you do this, then we will sponsor you to join to legitimately join the army, and she would be able to go in as an officer rather than as a recruit, and blah blah blah. So she agrees to it. She trains in the use of the rapier, and it's a type of gauntlet as her offhand weapon. And then they get on a spaceship and they fly to they get on a spaceship and they fly to the Emperor's planet. The Emperor's not there. It's basically a Gothic palace but it's not like a Gothic palace that's like out floating in the void. The Gothic palace is there on the planet. It's just run down. The Emperor, for whatever reason, they never explain, can't actually set foot on the planet anymore. And so the planet is practically deserted. The servants, there's only 3 living servants. The rest are all bone constructs. They're just walking around, bone skeletons, doing all the work. And that's where they meet the other necromancers and their cavaliers. The thing is that, like I said, this blurb, lesbian necromancers explore a haunted Gothic palace in space, is very misleading. Gideon possibly is lesbian. More, I got the feeling that she was more open that way. She does end up flirting and kind of falling in love with one of the necromancers there, but at one point she makes some comment about one of the other cavaliers who happens to be a man, and she's like, yeah, he's a good looking guy. And so I got the feeling that that wasn't, like, she's not strictly a lesbian. And the fact that, like, the rest of the necromancers, not all of them were female. There was Palamedes Sextus and Isaac. I don't remember what Isaac's last name was, but it was kind of interesting. You knew which person belonged to which house based on kind of a pseudo-Latin last name. It could be Latin. It just seemed a little pseudo-ish Latin-y to me. So their last names all had like a number reference in it, and it wasn't like she's called Gideon the Ninth in the title here, but she's actually Gideon Nav. That Nav referring to the fact that she's Gideon from the ninth house, and her her necromancer, who she hated, and who hated her. The only reason they were thrown together was she was the only able-bodied person on the planet. Either the other people on the planet were too old and decrepit to actually fill this role, or they were already dead and wandering around as basically skeletons, and you couldn't be a cavalier unless you were living. And so, yeah. So not all the cavaliers were men, or some were women, some were men, and same with the rest of the necromancers. There were some that were men, there were some that were women. Anyway, the emperor summoned them to his home planet because in 10,000 years ago, when the resurrection happened, he had certain necromancers with him that he called lictors. Now, these lictors were very, very powerful necromancers, and they were basically immortal. At least they would not die from getting old. But at this point in time, the lictors had all been killed in combat, and he needed more. So he summoned them to his palace to figure out how to become lictors. And that was their task, was to come there and to figure out how to become lictors. Now, he left clues and puzzles and things so that they would then go through the trials to become a lictor. And right off, you kind of found out that things were not all peachy keen with everybody. The fifth house necromancer and her cavalier were killed. They ended up finding two skeletons in the furnace. And as I said, instead of what this blurb is, the book is more like "And Then There Were None," or if you prefer the original title, 10 Little Indians. It's more of a murder mystery where they're wandering around trying to figure out which house is the one that is killing the rest of the participants. That's probably the best way to put it. And they're suspicious of each other. They're trying to figure out who these, because they were able to figure out, obviously they figured out who, the fifth necromancer and her cavalier were killed because they found the bodies, and the bodies had been killed. They were horribly disfigured and stuff. But the two bodies that were put into the furnace, they didn't figure out who those two were right away because of some magic that had been used on the bodies, and some of the and they couldn't always tell who was there and who was missing, because not everybody was always there at the same time. And they were able to, the person who was the murderer ended up being able to kind of skew the timeline a little bit so that they were unaware. And then those people who did have clues to who these bodies actually were suppressing those because they didn't know who they could trust of the other necromancers and cavaliers. Now, usually, I'm not really a big fan of "Oh, woe is me" as the main character, and Gideon the Ninth definitely didn't fit that mold. She hated where she grew up, but she was always trying to better her position, trying to make the best of a bad situation. She never, in my mind, sank into that trap of self-pity, which I absolutely detest, which is probably why I really didn't like Touching Spirit Bear. The main character was such a piece of garbage. And like I said, this blurb is very misleading in my opinion. Like I said, there was something mentioned about one of the necromancers, one of the necromancers probably being attracted to a girl, but it was mostly said as a joke, in my opinion, kind of to get the other person's get a reaction out of them. And anyway, that being said, like I said, don't believe this on the front. And like I said, Gideon does somewhat fall in love with, is attracted to one of the necromancers who happens to be a girl. It's never central to the story. It doesn't matter in the slightest as far as driving the plot forward. Now, there's some revelations that come about what I say is it arises that there are some mysteries around who Gideon actually is, or what she is, but unfortunately we never find out, which I think is I mean, it could be that they're saving those revelations for later in the series, but because of the way the book ends, it feels very unsatisfactory that they revealed that there were these mysteries, but they didn't reveal to us anything other than, hey, there's a mystery. Because the main bad guy, obviously is not who you thought they were, and makes some reference to sparing Gideon in the past, which couldn't have happened. And Gideon finds a picture that says something about her at one point, and she's never been off of the planet, the Ninth's home planet, ever. As far as the story goes, as far as what anybody else in the story knows, she's always lived on the Ninth's planet. So, the Ninth's house planet. So, yeah. Like I said, I did enjoy it. The action was good. There were a couple places where I felt that the author could have used more explanation. They talked about some of these the weapons. I mean, I know what a rapier is. I know vaguely what it's going to look like, but at the same time, these offhand weapons, she could have, I felt, done a better job at describing some of the offhand weapons, because she used the actual name of the weapons rather than and then just left it at that without like giving a description of any kind. And because of that, if you want to know what that weapon actually is, you're going to have to go and look it up as opposed to read it from context. And so, yeah, like I said, I think that they're in that way they could have been done a little bit better. The other thing is there were so many people, as far as the cast goes, that it and the names were a bit odd, and so it sometimes got a bit difficult to remember who was who in the book. Anyway, and that just may have been me more than the author. Anyway, Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. It's pretty good. Had an enjoyable time with a couple of things that I think could have been addressed and done better. Anyway, that's it for today. Enjoy what you're reading. As always, like and subscribe. Leave comments down below. put the bell on so you'll get notified when I post more videos, and enjoy what you're reading.